Hey everyone, so I've kind of had a thing going lately, and that is around mental health. And because for me it's about talking sensitively about certain experiences, because it's important and personal to each person. So I'm basing it off of my own experiences and things I've learned over time. So today specifically, I'm going to talk about some experiences and the knowledge I have about depression, anxiety, and seasonal affective disorder or SAD. Now, all three of these things are somewhat related. They have similar symptoms and can affect people in similar ways, and they also have similar connections to the parts of the brain that are affected by them, and similar kind of triggers. So to start with, I want to talk about depression and anxiety because they are the most closely linked, especially in terms of symptoms. Actually, first off, I should say all three of these things are part of the category of invisible disabilities or invisible illnesses. They're not always obvious. It's not always easy to tell if somebody has a mental illness or depressed or anxious or whatever, and that kind of has a whole bunch of challenges that come with it because people don't necessarily always understand that somebody's got this thing going on to them. But anyway, back to the definition of depression and anxiety. They both affect how easy it is, how clear our minds are when we try and think and interact. There are different causes for these conditions. Sometimes it can be stress, sometimes it can be actual brain chemistry issues, sometimes it can be grief or some other sort of trauma, and it can kind of manifest or show itself in a number of different ways. For myself, I've had symptoms definitely of anxiety, and depending on which specialist I've talked to, I've also had symptoms of depression, but because, as I mentioned, they are both very closely linked, it's not always easy to tell them apart. So the things I've experienced have been difficulty with clear thinking, problems with motivation and energy. I've had issues with my heart rate being erratic, my breathing being erratic, feeling claustrophobic in busy spaces, and just really having some kind of difficulties with kind of thinking clearly and getting my words out properly sometimes. I kind of describe it like having your head kind of stuffed full of cotton wool, and it's not really easy to think clearly sometimes when you're being overwhelmed by the anxiety feelings, and depression can make a similar effect. And as for seasonal affective disorder, that is a more specific kind of triggered condition. It comes when people are, they start to feel anxious, start to feel depressed and unhappy, but it's usually to do with the change in season. So going from the brighter, longer daylight hours into the darker, shorter daylight hours. There are some scientists and psychologists who believe that it is to do with the amount of vitamin D or lack of vitamin D that people experience going into winter months. And there are various other factors that people think may play into this experience. But basically it is a specific type of depression. It's not something that is necessarily ongoing. It's usually only related to the kind of winter or darker, colder months of the year. And usually when people can start getting out into the sunshine and becoming active again and all that kind of stuff, it tends to alleviate what's been going on, whereas depression and anxiety are kind of independent operators and generally outside of the influence of those kinds of external factors. Though definitely there can be something to say for the positive benefits of being outdoors, being active and getting that good old vitamin D. But yeah, it won't necessarily be as effective at helping with depression and anxiety. So that's kind of very general and kind of specific to me. Experience of depression, anxiety and seasonal affective disorder. It's one of those things that, as I said, is different for everyone, and there are a lot of specifics that we can go into around things like depression and anxiety as far as the impact and the triggers and symptoms and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's also a lot of information out there around awareness campaigns and things that people can do to help either themselves or someone they know. So I'll talk about that in this next segment.